You see a new app launch, right? But what if I told you that that little tech story is actually the first thread you can pull in a much, much bigger story? A story about redrawing the map of global power, connecting everything from silicon chips and solar panels all the way down to the cost of your groceries.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to start with the tech itself, this new AI battlefield. Then we'll zoom out to the unbelievable amount of energy it all needs, the huge geopolitical game with China, America's controversial playbook and response, and finally, how all this pressure is sparking this major ideological divide right here at home.
So our story really kicks off with a bit of a surprise. You know, when OpenAI, the undisputed king of AI, dropped its latest model, everyone was expecting a game changer. But the reaction was, well, let's just say a little more muted than usual.
For the very first time, OpenAI wasn't the hands-down winner. A competitor, xAI's Grok 4, actually beat it on this brand new, incredibly difficult test. And I mean, this was a real shock to the system in a field that OpenAI has just completely owned for years. This whole rivalry, it points to this fascinating kind of new problem in the field. It's called benchmark saturation. Basically, we're getting to a point where we're running out of tests that are actually smart enough to measure how powerful these things are. It's like the goalposts are moving faster than we can even build them. And this, right here, illustrates a super important point. This race isn't just about who has the highest score. As this quote points out, OpenAI's massive user base and its knack for building great products, that gives them this huge advantage that might be even more important than having the absolute top-performing model.
Okay, so let's peel back another layer here, because this is not just a battle of code and algorithms. This AI race is built on a physical foundation of just mind-boggling amounts of energy and infrastructure, and the costs are absolutely astronomical.
This brings us to the trillion-dollar question that people like Ben Shapiro are asking. We are pouring historic amounts of money into building these AI engines. But is the payoff, the actual productivity gain, going to show up fast enough to make it all worth it? Or are we just building the world's most expensive bubble?
Well, the bulls, the people betting big on this, their answer is pretty simple. The prize is just too big to pass up. They look at estimates like this, a potential market of over $5 trillion for business AI alone, and they say, yeah, the investment is huge, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what's coming.
But you know, the cost isn't just in dollars, it's in power. And you really have to see this number to believe it. A single AI company, Anthropic, is projecting that it will need 50 gigawatts of new power in just the next few years. 50.
And just to wrap your head around what that means, an energy expert, Phil Deutsch, points out that 50 gigawatts is roughly the entire amount of new power capacity the U.S. adds in a typical year from all sources. So we're talking about a demand spike that is completely unprecedented in modern history.
So when you have this insane need for resources, for power, well, it's not going to stay a domestic issue for long. It naturally spills out onto the world stage. And that's where we get to the primary geopolitical contest of our time, the dynamic between the U.S. and China.
While the U.S. is kind of scrambling to figure out how to meet this new energy demand, China is building at a pace that is just jaw-dropping. Look at this. In 2023 alone, China added more solar capacity than the entire United States has installed ever. I mean, that is industrial scale on a whole other planet. For some observers, like Ben Shapiro, you see that industrial might, and it makes this whole AI competition feel, well, existential. He argues that if you look at how China has allegedly used platforms like TikTok, the thought of them controlling the next, even more powerful generation of tools is frankly a terrifying prospect.
But there is another way to look at this. People like investor David Friedberg argue that asking who's going to win AI is just the wrong question. It's like asking who won the internet. His point is, no one wins it. It becomes this open, evolving platform that no single country can really, truly control.
And here's the twist. China's greatest strength, that top-down control, might also be its Achilles heel. You can see this clear trend. Ever since the state really started cracking down on its own tech entrepreneurs a few years back, the number of new companies being formed has just cratered. And that stifling of innovation,
that could be a huge problem for them in the long run. So with all this intense competition from the outside, the US is being forced to kind of rewrite its own economic rulebook. And that is kicking off some really fierce debates about what the right way to compete actually is.
And the most visible, and probably the most controversial change, is the decision to go all in on a tariff war. I mean, this is a complete 180 from decades of free trade policy. So the question is it a bold, necessary strategy? Or is it a really costly gamble with the entire global economy?
It really is a classic double-edged sword. On the one hand, you've got these potential upsides. You could generate revenue, you could push industries to come back home. But on the other hand, you've got these serious risks, like confusing investors or accidentally working against your own policy goals. It's a real tangled web.
And this debate over industrial strategy, it runs deep, especially with energy. It's a story of unintended consequences. Some argue that past policies, like these huge subsidies for solar and wind, actually had a weird side effect. They made it less attractive to invest in next-gen nuclear power research. And now that AI needs massive amounts of stable, clean power, the US is finding itself playing catch-up to China in that exact technology.
And all of this pressure, all of this global competition, it's not just happening out there. It's pouring gasoline on these ideological fires that are already burning right here at home, especially when it comes to the economy and just the basic cost of living.
You can really feel this in a sentiment that was captured in a viral TikTok. It's a young New Yorker celebrating a Chinese coffee chain showing up and framing it as a kind of victory that maybe this communist style of capitalism that pays workers better is actually beating American corporations at their own game.
And look, this sentiment doesn't come from nowhere. It's rooted in some really painful economic realities. For so many people, especially younger generations, you've got wages that aren't keeping up, while the cost of everything, from rent to groceries to housing, is just skyrocketing. It makes the whole system feel, well, kind of broken.
And so that's where all these different threads, tech, energy, geopolitics, domestic economics, that's where they all converge. It all boils down to this one massive question for the 21st century. What's the winning formula? Is it the centralized, state-directed strategy we see from China? Or is it America's traditional bet on the messy, chaotic, but unbelievably powerful engine of free market innovation? The answer to that is going to define the world we live in.